Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Engine Room. Today, as you know, we are going to be previewing every single nation heading to Qatar, the 32 nations. And today we have a very special episode because we're going to be talking about one of the favorite teams, in my opinion, if I do consider it so myself, and that is going to be France. So for that, you know that we have our World Cup correspondent, Diego. How are you?
How's it going?
Yeah, and we have a special guest in Jonathan Johnson. So, Jonathan, how are you? We are glad to have you here.
Hey there, guys. I'm delighted to be here as well. Thank you so much for the invitation and looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, so Diego, why don't you open up some of the questions that you had prepared for today?
Let's, jump right into it. First off, as I've been telling every nation, congratulations, because you've made it to the World Cup, right? It's a big thing. 15th World Cup appearance for France. What's different about this time for you?
Yeah, it's obviously France are always expected to get to the World Cup and to be sort of among the favourites for the title. And I think this year, what is different is obviously they come into it as defending champions. So the most recent example of that in France's history was back in 2002, and we know that didn't end particularly well for both the defending world and European champions at that time. And this time, France come into the World Cup, in a good place in terms of the talent, the squad, the roster that they can assemble, but also at the same time with a lot more controversy than we saw back in 2018. Quite a few more issues. You could argue that there's more talent than ever before, maybe more so than 2018, but also sort of more baggage for Didier Deschamps to have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned there some of the issues. Can you provide a little bit more of information on that, of what perhaps is the media trying to cover a little bit more, worse there's a little bit more controversy around this time around?
The controversial topics, everybody I think has already heard of the situation with Paul Pogba, the attempted blackmail. You've got the sexual harassment allegations against the French Football Federation, which is causing a lot of political upheaval in the country at this time. And then you've got some of the other sort of off-the-field issues, Kylian Mbappe and sort of his battle for control of the image rights, both for himself and also for his teammates. You have that kind of power struggle dynamic as well, since the likes of Karim Benzema have been readmitted to the French squad. So that's still something that's kind of ongoing. And then, one of the other crises that I think people maybe don't pay as much attention to is the fact that Didier Deschamps has lost a lot of the players he used to be able to really trust and depend upon to perform. We've just seen N'Golo Kanté ruled out for the World Cup and for the next 4 months. Another big blow, and Deschamps has lost a number of these trusted lieutenants on the pitch. And that's kind of why I think he's so desperate to try and give an opportunity to somebody like Paul Pogba to prove his fitness before the World Cup. Because if France are to have any success in Qatar, I think Deschamps will really need to rely on some of those names that he has trusted so much during his time in charge.
Yeah. You mentioned, obviously, the injuries. So that it's very important for, I think, people to know about the injuries. How important is N'Golo Kanté? And if there are any other, I guess, news of injuries or that we should be worried about for France?
I think if you look just in that position in the midfield, N'Golo Kanté being out, Paul Pogba being a doubt, suddenly that's the entire central midfield for France, which has been, so crucial. And also, with regards to Pogba, we know that Kanté is perhaps not the most vocal of guys in the dressing room. He's always very quiet, very softly spoken. His importance is more on the pitch, but Pogba is as important off the pitch as he is on it. So if you suddenly rip out that central midfield, I know that France have a lot of talent, talented players coming through in those positions, guys like Tchouaméni, guys like Camavinga. But it's a lot to ask of them to suddenly be ready to be starters for France at a World Cup, as opposed to sort of being brought in and perhaps growing into starting roles as the tournament goes on. So I think if Deschamps was to miss out on somebody like Pogba, I don't know if his return from injury doesn't go according to plan. I know that he's just returned to training. Something like that could really cause some issues for Deschamps. And also, he's got concerns, or he's had concerns recently over injuries to key guys like the captain Hugo Lloris, and some of the defensive stalwarts as well, Raphael Varane and there's been issues as well with the form of quite a few of these players. So you could say it's not been an ideal sort of lead into this World Cup at all for Didier Deschamps regarding the availability of some of those key names.
Now, Le Bleu they're in Group B alongside Australia, Denmark, and Tunisia. How do you feel about that? And what do you think are the chances of making out of the group?
I think it's a shame in many ways, the group draw, because it feels like it's kind of 2018 repeating itself again, given that it's Australia, it's Denmark again. But also at the same time, it's a World Cup. You can sort of never pick and choose what your group is going to look like. Having seen Tunisia up close against Brazil recently, I was impressed by them until they had a guy sent off in that match. I think they could be tricky opponents, and obviously there is kind of that you have to take into consideration the fact that there are a lot of Tunisians who live in France as well, and obviously Tunisia is a country that has sort of a lot of players who can sort of qualify for dual nationality. So it's kind of like a little bit of a derby within that group. Australia, with all due respect to them, I think are even lucky to be at the tournament. I don't particularly think that they will cause too many problems to many of the teams. The big issue, I think, for France in terms of the group stage is Denmark, because at this moment in time, certainly in terms of form, I think that Denmark are stronger than France. Maybe not in terms of sort of the quality overall in the squad, but in terms of the understanding, the chemistry in their team. I think that Denmark are going to be real underdogs at this World Cup once more, in the same way that they were in the Euros. And obviously we know what happened to Christian Eriksen had a really almost detrimental effect on the Danish team at a critical moment when they were starting their tournament, but they still managed to make light of that and go on a deep run in that tournament. And I think this time around they could perhaps surprise a few more people and go even further.
So sort of you mentioned before also with the injuries to Kante, to Pogba, I've seen personally, we've all seen how the Shams is trying to evolve perhaps a little bit, changing to a back three, back five. How do you think that will affect France in this World Cup? Like, what sort of people could be expecting in terms of the style of play? Will the Shams be as pragmatic as before? I think that's always sort of a concern that people have held against him. Like, you have so much talent in attack, Nkunku, Griezmann, Dembele maybe this time around, Mbappe, Benzema now back in the national team. So I guess two questions in one. What do you see basically with the formation? How does that change France coming into this World Cup? And basically also, what should people be expecting to see of France in this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, those are really interesting questions. And I think it's part of the reason why France struggled really at the last Euro, because there was a bit of confusion about what system they were going to play, which system would get the best out of the players. I mean, you've got to look at some of the regular performers in that team. They're not perhaps as good as they were in 2018. Guys like Benjamin Pavard, he had a great tournament in 2018, but there's never really been that much conviction that he is really a top quality defensive player. You've got talented players coming through, the likes of Koundé, the likes of Fofana, but they haven't actually really been tested at international level properly. So there is an issue over the experience as well. But sure, if you're just basing it on talent alone and assuming that Kimpembe returns to fitness soon, you could make an argument that France will probably go 3-4-3, which is how they finish the Euro. Maybe try and get somebody like Griezmann, now that he's playing a bit more regularly for Atletico, into the game behind the front two of Mbappe and Benzema. Perhaps Giroud occasionally, if assuming that he does make the squad to go to Qatar. I mean, there's been a lot of noise about Mbappe playing in the position that he likes best, which is alongside somebody who can be that focal point of the attack. So I can't see France lining up in a formation where they suddenly don't play with two players up top. For me, I think that is going to make the most sense. So the question is what Deschamps does with that midfield, and I think it all comes back once again to sort of Pogba's availability now, and whether Deschamps feels he can really call on him from the beginning of the tournament.
Mm. You mentioned Mbappe, you mentioned Benzema, and you mentioned experience. So I want to ask you about Karim Benzema, who has just been recognized as the best player in the world. What expectations are there on him, right? Obviously, him being the best player in the world, obviously age, experience, and then also Kylian Mbappe with everything that's going on. behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting kind of dynamic at the moment. Obviously, everyone was expecting Mbappe to join Benzema in Madrid. Then he doesn't. He extends his contract with PSG. So maybe there's a little bit of tension there. We saw Mbappe publicly congratulate Benzema on the Ballon d'Or, but also at the same time we saw Mbappe sulking in the award ceremony because he didn't feature very highly. So. I mean, I think there is a bit of a danger that there's too much expectation on Benzema to sort of now lead this French national team sort of single-handedly to the title. But also, I think there's also a danger that Kylian Mbappe tries to do too much on his own in order to sort of boost his chances of kind of taking over from Benzema as the leading player in the world. Obviously things haven't gone kind of according to plan with PSG over the last season or so. They're going to try again for Champions League success. We'll see how that works out. Obviously, we know a lot of that depends on Neymar and Messi as well. But, I think at the moment there is a feeling that Mbappe is kind of feeling a bit of pressure, when you're seeing guys like Haaland, the way he's performing with Manchester City in the Premier League, and the fact that Mbappe is not quite hitting the same heights that he has in the last couple of years, because he's now sharing the limelight with Neymar and Messi. But also, he's not required to sort of single-handedly lead PSG at this moment in time to win games, whereas it was the case in the last couple of seasons. Now, for me, that makes me suspect that, he might try to make it all about him once again at the World Cup, as we saw at the Euros, and that potentially can have a really detrimental effect on the French team.
Aside from those big names in France, who would you say is a player to look out for in this tournament?
I think it's really difficult to just pick one or two names to get excited about looking in that French team. I mean, I think it's difficult to look past a guy like Tchouaméni at the moment, especially when you look at the way he's sort of settling into life with Real Madrid. I think he is certainly going to be one of the top talents moving forward. We all know that William Saliba as well has really settled into life at Arsenal, having spent a bit of time in Ligue 1 developing. So I think he's somebody else to keep an eye on as well. And obviously, a lot's expected of Nkunku as well. There's rumours about him joining Chelsea. He's been so good for Leipzig the last couple of seasons. So there are guys in this group who I think are primed to sort of perhaps explode onto the world stage. So, I think France, as always, we'll have a lot of eyes upon them because they have so much talent there. But Didier Deschamps has never really sort of shown himself to be the best coach in terms of bringing through that young talent. He normally relies on more experienced heads. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what he can get out of that young talent, because there is a feeling now that France kind of need to move on from Deschamps to somebody like Zinedine Zidane to lead this next generation through, and for France to tap into this kind of what I'd call dynastic potential, where they could genuinely be a national team that wins World Cups and Euros consecutively and, are the dominant force in world football.
Mm-hmm. So before we move, I guess, into your, the best 11 that you could make for France, I want to ask you about two players. One of them, which is one of my favorite players, even though he may be a bit inconsistent. And that is, I think a lot of people here in the engine room will be wanting to hear what's a French person's opinion about someone like Ousmane Dembélé, about whether he can add something to the roster, because we know that he's a player that perhaps hasn't been having the best of years at Barcelona, but now seems to be turning a corner. Do you think he can add anything to the squad? Because it seemed that in the 2018 tournament, he was there for the first match, but then sort of just simply disappeared. Is there a second chance for him here in this tournament? Will he go to begin with?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think if he's fit, he'll definitely be considered. We've seen that Deschamps does believe in him and does try to involve him when possible. And I think, he has that explosive profile and can definitely add something in a squad sense. For me, I think it would be a big risk to go with him as part of a starting 11, given that you can't be sure, that he's A, going to be consistent, B, not going to break down with injury and perhaps not be relied upon during the tournament. So I think there's a wild card option to come on from the bench. It's difficult to find better than Dembélé, especially since his form has picked up a bit this season with Barcelona as well.
And about Griezmann, I think that this season he sort of kind of recently he has been playing better, more with Atletico after Barcelona, and well, Atletico Madrid have sort of settled their differences. Was there ever a moment, a possibility that perhaps he wouldn't be considered a starter, or is he just an undisputed captain or not captain, but captain on the pitch for someone like Deschamps?
I mean, look at the most recent France team that took to the pitch. You've got guys like Giroud and Griezmann. I think they're the only ones who have upwards of 100 caps. I mean, even though Benzema has, a long and storied history, he obviously missed so many years with the French national team that he's not sort of that same level of experience as those guys. And I think you're right. I think it's been really important that Atleti and Barca have been able to turn the page on Griezmann recently, because that liberates him a bit more mentally, because Griezmann is absolutely crucial to the way that France set up under Deschamps. In fact, you could argue that Griezmann is actually the most important player for France under Deschamps, given the way that he performed in 2018 and the fact that he's still a key part of this team coming into this World Cup as well. And I think to get the best out of him, playing him sort of behind a target man like a Benzema or Giroud, and then with somebody like Mbappe to the side, to utilize the pace. I think there is a chance that, you start to see the best of Griezmann as the tournament goes on. And perhaps, maybe in an understated way, not playing as much at the beginning of the season because of the situation with Barca and Atleti actually means that Griezmann will probably go into the tournament a bit fresher than some of these other players.
Definitely.
Now, as we mentioned, I mean, we want you to play a little Deschamps here and give us what you think would be your best 11 if you had to pick right now.
Yeah, it's a really it's a tricky topic, but I think if I was to have a stab at it, I mean, I don't think you can look past Lloris in goal. I think, assuming that it goes 3-4-3, I think the three defenders would be Varane in the middle, Kimpembe probably on the left side of that, and based on his form, I would probably go with somebody like Saliba, because ultimately I think he will be an established member of that national setup moving forward. I think Pogba, if he's fit, will start, so you can put him in the middle. I would like to see Tchouaméni, starting, especially now that Conte, won't be in contention for this at all. I think on the left, if he's fit, you will see Theo Hernandez. And on the right, I'm probably going to go a bit sort of out of the blue, because I know that not many people know too much about Jonathan Klaus. I think in terms of his crossing, his set-piece delivery, I think he could be a real surprise candidate on that right side. And to be honest, when you asked me about surprise names to keep an eye on earlier, I was thinking more about the young guys in the squad. But of course, Klose being sort of around the 30 mark and only just recently an international, he's somebody I don't think many people will be too familiar with, who they should definitely keep an eye on. And then if I'm moving forward to the front three, I think it'll be Griezmann behind Mbappe and Benzema.
I like that Klaus shout. I really like that. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any other closing statements here, Buga?
Not really. I guess one last player I would like to ask you about, you mentioned it briefly, was Nkunku, but for me, Nkunku has been really reaching new heights in the last 2 seasons. And I think that maybe he could be another player that more of the general public are sort of getting more familiar with recently. And maybe this World Cup could sort of give him that platform for it. Do you think that perhaps maybe Deschamps will find himself in a similar situation as the last tournament, where he had an ideal setup in mind? He wanted to go with that 4-2-3-1, but then he changed it, dropped Dembele and put Matuidi, and that was the lineup for the rest of the tournament. Could something like that happen? Do you think there's a maybe some doubts that he needs to fix, Deschamps, before the tournament is upon us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think he definitely has the potential to do it. I mean, I think there's a few guys who could almost sneak into, a starting lineup if they can really play to their best and deliver in the way that Deschamps wants them to. I mean, you've got guys like Kingsley Coman, who, if he was more fit and more consistent, could also probably start and could maybe rival Klose on the right side. But Nkunku is a good shout. Moussa Diaby as well. I mean, I know he's dropped off the radar a little bit at the beginning of the season with Leverkusen, but still somebody who, Deschamps has shown a willingness to bring into the international setup, and somebody who could be an interesting alternative on the left, to Hernandez as well. I think that Nkunku is definitely somebody who could add a bit of variety. And given his form, despite the fact that Leipzig have been a bit up and down, I think he definitely has to be in the squad. Again, a bit like Dembele, he's somebody who I think could be an interesting wild card at the beginning of the tournament. But I think the difference between Nkunku and most of these other guys is he's more consistent in his performances. Obviously, we don't know if that translates from club level to international level yet. But he is somebody who I think Deschamps could depend upon as the tournament goes on. And I think there's other difficult shouts as well that Deschamps might have to make regarding players in poor form, like an Adrien Rabiot, for example, who has really struggled as part of quite a poor Juve side this season.
Yeah.
And
well,
can I ask Jonathan one more thing? Are you okay with it?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you about how do you manage that pressure of being like reigning champions? And as we all know, that previous champions like Germany, they've gone out in really bad manners, perhaps.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that coming to this tournament? Do you feel yourself as a favorite, like I mentioned at the start of the video, or perhaps you just want to take it step by step? Because I think people do see France as that top team when you make your simulations, your predictions. It's always going to be France, Brazil at the end of the day. Do you still feel comfortable like that, or do you want to take it, I guess, in a lesser, with a little more lesser importance, just game by game?
In my opinion, regardless of whether France were world champions or not, many people would look at that squad and say that they were favourites for the title. So I think it's at times like these that having a coach like Didier Deschamps really becomes an advantage. Because Deschamps, in my opinion, is a manager who excels in the kind of tournament format as opposed to a league. And I think that he knows exactly how you need to start, with your squad going into a tournament, and how you need to sort of build the players up. Normally, when to make the right changes in terms of formation or in terms of the players that you bring into the setup, and I think that will help to temper the expectations and the pressure around France. I don't think that there will be as much complacency as there has been in the past, because there's been so many players sort of injured, out of form. Nobody can afford to let their game down just going into this World Cup. And also, given the timing of the World Cup as well, there is potential that some of these players pick up an injury late on and drop out, and then suddenly some new players are playing to impress Deschamps as well. So I think France are aware that they're going to be considered favourites going into this, but I don't think there'll be the same complacency factor, especially after they were so disappointing in the Euro. I think that would have taught them a lot.
Definitely.
I think that's perfect. There's nothing else that we can ask right now. And thank you, Jonathan, for your time. I want to give you the space to, give you your closing comments, where people can find you and all that.
Thanks a lot, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think the best place for people to find me professionally is on Twitter. So at @JON_Legosip, and there you can find all my stuff with CBS, whether it's written articles, sort of video, all of that stuff. So thanks a lot for having me on again, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope everyone enjoys the World Cup and that we get to chat soon about another French success.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all. As you all know, the Engine Room is trying to cover all 32 teams right before the World Cup. So we got more coming for you. Please comment, like, and subscribe. See y'all soon.
Bye. Take care.